14.3 review. So before starting the actual training session and designing it, I had to kind of set out a list of aims for the client based off of lifestyle questionnaire and based off of their sport. And these aims obviously had to be specific to the performer. So working with the client, we kind of had set out some aims in terms of increasing their muscle mass, because they said they wanted to get more toned and increase muscle mass, which would help them in rugby. Increase their power, because we did a series of tests and power was one of their weaknesses, which would help if they were better at in rugby in terms of sprinting. And the last one was to lose some weight as well. That was a target of theirs that they chose themselves. I wasn't too concerned about their weight, as they were only slightly in the above average in terms of weight, so that wasn't too much of an issue for me, but that was something that the client wanted to do, so I would aim to help lose weight in the fitness program as well. So those were the general program aims for the long term, but the specific aims for the session that I created, and the one that I had the client participate in, was to reach a target of around 80% of their maximum heart rate, 80 to 90%, within that sort of range, so that they're working anaerobically. And I wanted them to work anaerobically because I felt that that would replicate the scenario of a sprint, which their position does quite a lot in rugby, as they're sprinting to gain as much distance as possible, or perhaps even to score a try. So I wanted to replicate that so that the body would adapt and work more efficiently using anaerobic glycolysis and working anaerobically in the future. Another specific session aim was to have the performer reach an RPE of at least 7 out of 10. This could be considered high, but I feel because my client is athletic and does perform regularly, that this should be doable for them, because I want to push the athlete so that they're actually making progress and having to adapt physiologically. So I feel that an RPE of at least 7 would be doing that and ensuring that they're actually working hard and having to adapt. Both of those targets are easily measured, so the RPE is just the rating that the client says themselves, with of course explanation as to the scale of it, and the maximum heart rate is easily measured using a heart rate monitor during the session. So that could be a watch or one that you strap around their chest. In terms of measuring the long-term goals of that increased muscle mass and increased power and loss of weight, I'd get them doing a standing broad jump test regularly. So in the training program, I had them doing that on the 3rd week and the 6th week to track progress, as that would be a good measure of power. Specifically to sprinting as well, because a standing broad jump is going to have that measure that power as they propel forward, as opposed to vertically if we were to use the vertical jump test. In terms of their muscle mass and loss of weight, I would get them doing a BMI test and a skin fold caliper test as well on those the 3rd and 6th week. Of course, before participating in any exercise or any of the fitness sessions that I've planned, I need to do a full risk assessment. So this is the risk assessment for the session that my client would be participating in. I also had the client doing a PAR-Q before the session as well, just to ensure that there weren't any risks that I wasn't aware of beforehand. and ensured that the exercise was appropriate and wouldn't cause them any injuries or health risks. So before the session, these were all of the results and blood tests, resting heart rate, BMI, target heart rate zones, and peak flow results. So they're results from tests before the training, something that we can look back on and compare and track progress throughout the session with, and also something that will help me in the session as well. So their resting heart rate allowed me to make those target zone values and get a gauge for what their anaerobic training zone is. So in terms of planning the session beforehand, obviously I needed to make a list of equipment that I needed, the sort of space and facilities that I needed, the health and safety considerations or emergency procedures. And the majority of that was in that risk assessment. Obviously I had to do their PARQ as well for health and safety, and I did do an informed consent as well with the client, just for legal reasons. Obviously I made sure that they were aware of fire safety procedures, had first aid kit readily available in case the client did get injured. And yeah, so you can see the equipment there, the ladder, a mat, cones, and the amount of space needed as well. Moving on to the actual content of the session then. So before actually doing any of the physical activity, I had planned to do an overview of the session, just give them a brief overview so that they knew what they were in for, and again give them that option to back out if they wanted to, and it didn't sound like something that they could do. I also checked jewellery because they shouldn't really be wearing jewellery as it's a safety hazard in case it gets caught on something. Also had to apply the heart rate monitor to the client as well, so that we could track that they were working in the zone that I wanted them to be. And also just do a general check of the floor for any hazards, any objects on the floor that they could trip on or anything. In terms of the actual warm-up, so the warm-up that I chose was based around a ladder, so it was a lot of kind of plyometric fast movements, mainly focused on the legs because that's what I would be focusing the main session on, power in their legs. So I wanted to focus on warming up the muscles in the legs and increasing the elasticity of those muscles so that they're obviously less prone to injury during the session and after the session as well, of course. So this warm-up was on a ladder, and they would do one set of things going up the ladder and do a different set of things coming down. So first they went going up the ladder was 2-foot jumps. So that was just in each step, going in 2 feet in each step together. And then as they came back, they did a backwards jog. And then the second time going up, they had 1 foot in each step of the ladder and jogged back. Third time they hopped through on one leg, so all on the same leg through, and did cross step coming back, and did the opposite leg the next time and still cross stepped back. And then they went up with 2 feet in and 2 feet out, so they would step 2 feet into the step of the ladder and then spread their feet apart slightly so that they were outside of the ladder, and they'd do that with each step. And then coming down, they did a side step back. And all of that was done twice through. It gave them a thorough warm-up of their legs and raised their heart rate as well in preparation for the session, meaning that they were already working towards that anaerobic zone, so it wasn't as much of a jump and it would delay OBLA. after those short bursts, short kind of plyometric movements, I also had the client doing dynamic stretches as well. I didn't want them to do any static stretches. I wanted to keep them moving and keep increasing the elasticity of the muscles, particularly in their legs, but also some supporting muscles as well. So I had them doing walking lunge, so that was forwards, and that would obviously focus on muscles in their legs. And I also had them doing holding their heel to their glute, so that was a quadriceps stretch, again focused on the legs. I had them doing a latissimus dorsi stretch, which was a lunge and twist. Latissimus dorsi would be kind of supporting a lot of the movements in the main session as well, such as when they kind of go from a burpee position to jumping up in the air. I also had them doing some arm stretches, as some of the exercises did involve kind of using your arms as leverage as well. So just to kind of have a full body warm up to prevent any kind of risk of injury at all. So those arm stretches consisted of pulling their arm across their body and holding it against their chest with the other arm. Obviously, both arms. You would do that. They did that on both, and that was walking as well. They continued to walk as they did that. Kept them moving the whole time just to keep that heart rate high. I also had them doing arm circles, walking as well to warm up the muscles in their arms. So yeah, like I said, the warm up focused on his quads, his hamstrings, glutes, groin, hip flexors, and lats, as those are the main muscles being used in the session, or the main supporting muscles as well. So they would be the muscles that are at most risk in the session. I also had an alternative warm up just in case we didn't have the ladder available for whatever reason, or if there was a kind of lack of space. So if there was a lack of space, I would have had the client jogging at a 60% of their maximum speed. So that's a judgment for them to make themselves. And I'd have them doing that on the spot for 1 minute. Then I'd have them doing high knees on the spot for 20 seconds, heel flicks for 20 seconds, and then I'd have them walking along the width of the area, lunging every 3 steps. Then they'd do the same but sweep the floor instead of lunging, which is a calf stretch. Then I'd have them doing a lunge twist. So like I said, that's kind of focused on the latissimus dorsi. Then I'd have them doing the same but opening the gate, then the same but closing the gate, and then I'd have them doing the same but with arm swings. So you can see that alternative warms up the exact same muscle groups. It just doesn't replicate the kind of fast plyometric movement that the ladder had, but it still has the exact same effect in terms of a warm up that I had already planned. So that was just an alternative in case the equipment or space wasn't available. So the next part is the main content, so the main session. I focused this, like I said, on the client's legs. So I focused this on increasing the size of the muscle in the legs, so having hypertrophy of quadriceps and hamstrings, perhaps glutes as well, just to improve power in the client's legs. This was obviously because, as a rugby player, the client wants to have power in their legs so that they can propel themselves forward and exert maximal force so they can cover maximal distance in the shortest amount of time, because they want to increase their speed so that they can make those sprints down the wing, or sprints to beat an opponent, or to gain ground on the rugby pitch, as you obviously want to get as far forward as possible, or perhaps even to score a try as well. So yeah, I wanted the session to focus on the client's legs. However, sidelined, it did help lose weight as well, another one of their goals.